Well, I'll be darned. It says we're live. Today's Thursday, July the 10th, 2025, and this is the last day of the week for me since I'm Monday through Thursday kind of guy. We're going back into The Darkening by Rob and Laura Petrie, or is it Petrie? I have no idea. But it's good. We're going to go to chapter 6 today and try to touch on chapter 7. Chapter 6, the subtitle is Propaganda Rules the Roost and the Things People Believe. There is so much truth in this. I've pre-read the chapter and can't disagree with much, if any of it. You know, we saw a similar application of propaganda during the COVID-19 hysteria. This piece of masterful propaganda was whipped up and maintained by Washington. This time the beneficiary was the pharmaceutical industry. Usually when Washington runs off with the mouth and spreads their propaganda and bends the minds of Americans, it's to support the military-industrial complex, this time the pharmaceutical complex. Understand, while nearly nobody at all died from or of the virus, many died with it in their systems. The myriad lies, laws, and campaigns to keep the people submissive to this man-made insanity were as successful as the false fuel shortages promulgated in both world wars. Now again, it was Americans' gullibility that put them in this most undesirable of places. Undesirable? It sucks. At the end of World War II, Americans were eager to rebuild a war-torn world. America went to irresponsible extremes, spending far and away much too much money rebuilding their enemies, foreign governments, allies, and enemy worldwide. Washington spent hundreds of millions of dollars rebuilding factories and infrastructure in Europe and Japan. At the same time, they neglected our own crumbling and aging infrastructure and our industrial base, which was rusting away. Now understand something. Just understand. American steel companies were struggling with furnaces 60 to 80 years old. Our railways, they ran aging locomotives over even older tracks. As a result, new steel companies in Germany and Japan, shiny new machines, shiny new everything, acquired state-of-the-art equipment at our expense. Bridges and railways were replaced with new ones. The latest equipment was provided to Europe and Japan. Any wonder why they surpassed us in the 70s? It's because we did it. This expensive and state-of-the-art equipment was far beyond the reach of American cities or companies. All of this was done on America's taxpayers' backs. Yes, Harry S. Truman, the bomber and butcher of Japan. He rushed financial aid to his former enemies while turning his back on a troubled and struggling America. Oh, Truman, you bastard. His treacherous policies and misguided loyalty brought us from World War II to yet another war, this time on the Korean Peninsula. I mean, after all, he was allegedly getting rich, far richer than he had ever imagined, and all he had to do was exploit, lie to, murder, and betray his own people. For a Missouri native, this is probably second nature. Truman was addicted to the rewards of the military-industrial complex. He loved war and the money he made under the table from Defense Department contractors, stock trades, etc. The income of Truman's estate far exceeded his expectations or even hopes and empowered him to go further. As with most American presidents, he left the Oval Office a whole hell of a lot richer than when he took office. It was during this time that the Truman family raked in the cash. It was during this time that the Truman family came to realize the real value of Swiss banks. It's not a salary from Washington, but what shows up in a Swiss account that really means anything to a politician. Truman couldn't wait to see more young men and young women maimed, disfigured, murdered in a conflict where they didn't belong, in a war we had no business fighting. As Truman's precarious policies prevailed, that's cute, a lot of P's, a new enemy was rising in Eastern Europe. That enemy was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, a dictatorship largely armed, supplied, and even trained by Roosevelt and Churchill before and throughout the Second World War. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. With the weapons and supplies shipped to them, coupled with the spoils of war, the USSR, the Soviet Union, stop the letters, the Soviets were in a good condition to try their hand at world domination. Their plans were secret, but their goals were not. In order to achieve the hitherto impossible goal of conquering America, they secretly began a backdoor operation. They left Europe to fend for themselves while they concentrated their efforts elsewhere. Now, this put forth the illusion that the Soviet Union had no expansionist goals because Europe would have been an obvious target. Instead, they ignored Europe and worked directly against America. Enter the Cold War. This plan bore a striking resemblance to Adolf Hitler's plan to disintegrate German society and conquer them from within. With regard to this plan, Russians clearly understood the old adage, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And you know what? Their plan worked. 1950s America was recovering from the damage of World War II. Fast becoming a world economic powerhouse, America was growing by leaps and bounds. The only real restraint was that they now found themselves in an unwinnable war in Korea. The American economy was slowly improving, despite facing continued aftershocks, those of financing Truman's new war. Chapter 7. Truman's treachery knew no bounds. Another war for fun and profit. American citizens, as in World War II, weren't very happy about being thrust into yet another prolonged conflict. Only a few months after the war had begun, it became clear that this war was unwinnable. Although ultimate failure was clear, Truman persisted, reaping his ill-gotten gains from the military-industrial complex. He continued spending taxpayers' monies with reckless abandon. He did this at the expense of the lives of our brave young men, our brave young women, all thrust into an illegal, unreasonable, and unwinnable war. As with all wars, the only beneficiaries were the many companies that made up the military-industrial complex, from shoelaces to tanks. Harry Truman, who topped the list of criminally cunning professionals, found a new fortune to be made on the dead and dying in Korea. Understand, in any war, there are a large number of soldiers. They need to be fed, clothed, trained, equipped, treated, moved, armed. The only real reason we entered this war, like all wars since the Civil War, was financial. There's money to be made for people who don't give a damn about human life. When the military-industrial complex performs well, so does the general economy. Don't forget there are well-paid benefactors such as Harry S. Truman. I mean, if ever anyone deserved the death penalty, it was Harry. Unfortunately, as we found and financed wars around the world, find it, finance it, get involved, we got nothing in return. According to the late Chairman Mao Zedong of China, he said, and I quote, "War is a function of profit. No other excuse may be made for an offensive war with the exception of defensive war." And understand, objectively speaking, you've got to earn more than you spend, or war isn't worth it. The only exception is when you wage war in defense of yourselves. We've spent far, far more than we realize in our myriad wars, police actions, operations, pushing America deeper and deeper into debt. We fail to realize that this single principle of war, as a function of profit, betrays its evil. North Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Panama, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and now Ukraine, all shining examples of our collective ignorance when it comes to war. Who knows who else will fall victim to the warlords of Washington, D.C. and the military-industrial complex? Let me tell you about a Cold War. A Cold War was a war of words, propaganda, and money as it worked its way around the globe with the USA and USSR as primary opponents and instigators of the Cold War. Players in a game of global chess, if you will. The danger of this Cold War brought about the rise of a courageous young American, Senator Joseph McCarthy. Senator McCarthy risked life, limb, and reputation in his pursuit and prosecution of communists, sympathizers, fifth columnists, their spies all over the United States. His work cast a broad net over the communist fifth column. The communist threat which McCarthy pursued and battled was all too real. Russia, the initiator of this threat, now possessed the atomic bomb. Yeah, they got the bomb. Traitorous Jewish communists, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, stole the critical data on America's atomic bomb and handed it over to the Soviets. It was clear by then that they weren't the only communist spies in America. No, Julius and Ethel were a part of an expanding fifth column. These two traitors paid for their treachery with their lives. They were subsequently executed in federal prisons. Now, how deep was that? Come on, how deep was that? Give it some thought. Allegedly, and this is all opinion, this is all stated in my opinion, don't take it as fact unless you find it to be so. We've got this guy dropping bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, knowing that there's a better alternative. We got this guy walking us through one war, out of a war, into another. Oh, he didn't make that much money. Well, if you could access his Swiss bank accounts, you might be surprised. Next week, we're going to talk about Chapter 8, A Hero Rises, rounding up the communists. And we're going to do Chapter 9, A New Player in the Field, Mao's China in the Wings. We'll cover those two next week. I hope you've had something to, give some thought to. If you want to follow along, you can get this book in 1 or 2 days on Amazon, The Darkening by Rob and Laura Petrie. I hope you follow along. I'm Max. That's how it is for now.